The man's name was Sejun Park. While he was returning home from buying groceries, he accidentally entered the Black Tower. Nobody knows the origin of these Black Towers, but they appeared globally. No one can enter without an invitation, and there's another way, which is the reward adventurers get after clearing it. The price of these golden tickets had soared to 200 million won each. As a newbie in the workforce, it was naturally impossible for him to afford one. So, when Sejun Park saw the portal, he rushed in, thinking it was his good fortune, not realizing that this portal was a glitch in the Black Tower. The arrival of Sejun Park was also noticed by the administrator of the Black Tower, so they needed to fix the glitch quickly. Meanwhile, Park Sejun was still elated, but the next second he suddenly froze, as he found himself not in the adventurers described square, but in a desolate pit. The only exit was as high as 3 or 4 stories, and no matter how much he shouted, there was no response. He fiddled around all day with no progress, only for his stomach to start growling. Fortunately, the food he had just bought at the supermarket had also been brought in with him. Looking at the limited amount of food, he carefully arranged them neatly. After filling his stomach, Sejun Park realized that he didn't know how long he would be trapped, and his supplies wouldn't last many days. He had to find a way out before running out of food, or he would surely starve. At that moment, he noticed the apple seeds left over from what he had just eaten, and Sejun Park had a bold idea: self-sufficiency. He then buried the apple and divided the few spring onions he had into segments. After completing all this, night had already fallen. Just then, a terrifying sound came. When he looked up, he unexpectedly saw a flying dragon, and Sejun Park was so frightened that he fainted. When he woke up again, 2 days had passed. Subsequently, he leaned against a plant unconsciously, but when he came to his senses, he wondered how there could be a tree here. Surprisingly, the spring onions he had planted 2 days earlier had grown over 2 meters tall, and even the nearby apple and cherry tomato seeds had sprouted. Normal plants couldn't grow so fast. It seems the power of the Black Tower had influenced them. In order not to disturb the young sprouts' growth, Sejun Park decided to collect the spring onions first, and he was very curious about their taste, so he took a bite immediately. The next moment, he experienced what it means to be intensely reinvigorated, as the spring onions had reached a new level of spiciness. It turned out that not only the growth rate had changed, but the spiciness had also been greatly enhanced. After Sejun Park recovered, he became curious about which floor the cave was on, wondering if it might be a height unreachable even by top players. Just then, a few drops of water fell on his face, which he found very strange. When he looked up, unexpectedly, it was a rabbit at the top of the cave. The rabbit leapt down, using Sejun Park as a stepping stone, and performed a series of acrobatic movements that stunned him. It seemed it was not an ordinary rabbit. The rabbit also showed interest at the planted spring onions, and then pointed at them, smacking its lips to signal Sejun Park. Watching the rabbit's gestures, Sejun Park realized it was asking if it could eat some, to which he complied to. Unexpectedly, the rabbit also loved spring onions, and then, Sejun Park and the rabbit sat down together to munch on spring onions. After eating, the rabbit started making a chattering sound calling outwards to the forest above the cave. This made Sejun Park very curious. Then another rabbit jumped down from above and joined the other rabbit. Seeing their intimate demeanor, Sejun Park realized they were a couple, and the rabbits confirmed this. The 2 rabbits seemed to have come with a purpose. They wanted to live there with Sejun Park. Seeing the little rabbit's weak and helpless expressions filled with eager anticipation, it was truly hard to refuse. Sejun Park also agreed to their request, but they couldn't just freeload. However, before he could finish stating his conditions, the rabbits pounced on him, expressing their gratitude. Afterwards, they began to work hard. One was responsible for watering the seedlings, and the other took care of pruning the spring onions. Sejun Park hadn't expected that the rabbits would come with their own farming tools. Mr. Rabbit's watering can continuously produce water, and Mrs. Rabbit's apron seemed to have spatial magic, able to produce farming tools like scissors and shovels. With their help, the farm work was quickly completed. Sejun Park also noticed that the cherry tomatoes were growing much faster than before. It seems the rabbits were helping the plants grow. The rabbit couple was watching Sejun Park nervously, thinking he was dissatisfied with their work, as he had previously mentioned that they couldn't just eat and live for free. However, Sejun Park acknowledged their efforts, which made the rabbit couple very happy. Just then, the rabbits started discussing and then ran to an empty corner nearby. After choosing a spot with good geomancy, Mr. Rabbit began to dig around the space. Moments later, with Mrs. Rabbit hanging up a garland, a cozy house was born. The construction had tired Mr. Rabbit quite a bit, but Sejun Park acknowledged their abilities. But just at that moment, Mrs. Rabbit started calling with intimate intent, soon beckoning Mr. Rabbit to come inside the house for a chat. This startled Mr. Rabbit. It was broad daylight, after all, but Mrs. Rabbit, not caring about the time, dragged him into the house, leaving Sejun Park to tearfully bless them. Who understands the pain of being single? Just then, a puff of black smoke suddenly came up from behind him, causing Sejun Park to jump up in pain, scorching him such that he rolled frantically on the ground. When he turned around, he discovered that it was actually coming from a plastic bottle. The refraction from the plastic bottle focused the sunlight into a point precisely precisely landing on him. When Sejun Park came to his senses, he was shocked. In such harsh conditions, he hasn't given up hope. That's right, this is the first lesson in wilderness survival, how to start a fire outdoors. However, after several attempts, Sejun Park couldn't succeed. It seemed that it was not as easy as he had imagined. Just at that moment, the rabbit couple's door was pushed open, and Mr. Rabbit came out looking haggard, then saw Sejun Park lying on the ground blowing on leaves. He immediately came over to offer help. You came just at the right time. Then, the rabbit took charge of blowing air at the leaves, while Sejun Park stood up to refocus the sunlight. The next instant, a flame was kindled. Seeing this, Sejun Park was very excited, because now he could eat cooked food. After a period of roasting, the spring onions were finally ready. Removing the charred outer layer, the taste of the spring onions became sweet and crisp. The charcoal roasting made the spring onions as sweet as candy, feeling like a wild horse running free across the plains in your mouth. Afterward, the rabbit couple imitated him and learned to eat the roasted spring onions. Just a simple couple of bites conquered them with the taste of human food. This was also the first cooked meal Sejun Park had since he arrived at the Black Tower. The next morning, he woke up. After eating and drinking his fill, Sejun Park made torches using the flame, intending to use them to light up the entire cave. But along the way, he discovered a large fish in the water that jumped out the water. Seeing the fish struggling on the ground, Sejun Park was very surprised, as he had not seen any fish here before, possibly due to the darkness. Sejun Park couldn't wait to start grilling the large fish. Before long, he took a big bite of the grilled fish. The long-missed taste of meat made Sejun Park praise it continuously, but unexpectedly, the rabbit couple also wanted to try it. Although he was surprised, he still let the rabbits taste it. In the days that followed, he learned some patterns. Every 30 days, there would be a solar eclipse here, during which a blue moon would appear in the sky, accompanied by some unknown monsters roaming at the cave entrance. Due to the low battery of his phone and computer, Sejun Park used traditional methods to keep time, and now it was the 61st day of him being trapped in the cave. Not long after, the rabbit couple also had many little rabbits. These little rabbits really liked Sejun Park, and he thus became the godfather of the rabbits. The mischievous little rabbits were exhausting for the rabbit couple, so Sejun Park volunteered to help them take care of the kids. After getting their permission, he took the of little rabbits to see his vegetable garden. The cherry tomatoes he had planted were now successfully flowering. Fortunately, he came every day to pollinate them manually, but over time Sejun Park also became somewhat overwhelmed. If only bees could fly here. At that moment, a little rabbit also tried to fiddle with the cherry tomato flowers like Sejun Park, but a little bit of pollen that fell caused the little rabbit to sneeze. After calming down the mischievous rabbit, Sejun Park was delighted to find that fruits had appeared on the tomato vine. This made him so happy that he sang and danced, his 2 months of effort finally paying off. The next morning, the first thing Sejun Park did was to put on a spring onion cold weather outfit, as a new solar eclipse was about to begin. Prepared, he then said goodbye to the rabbit couple as they went into their home. By evening, many monsters were wandering outside the cave, and Sejun Park sat inside with a vacant stare, the noise outside making it difficult for him to sleep. To prevent the outside monsters from detecting him, Sejun Park hid his scent in advance. But waiting for the blue moon to end was indeed torturous. Just when he thought he could endure a little longer, he heard a loud noise coming from outside the cave. As Sejun Park looked up towards the cave entrance, a huge red bear was also staring intently at the entrance. Seeing the colossal beast in front of him, Sejun Park's heart rate increased. Fortunately, the red bear had not yet noticed the little person inside the cave. Seeing this, Sejun Park tried to hide deeper inside the cave, but unfortunately, cans and water bottles from his bag fell to the ground. He thought the sound was too soft to attract the red bear, but the creature had already positioned itself at the cave entrance. This scene terrified Sejun Park out of his wits, and the red bear was roaring madly outside, looking ready to devour him. Overwhelmed with fright, he soon fainted. When daylight came, the little rabbits came to wake Sejun Park, finding him sleeping very deeply, so Mr. Rabbit forcefully woke him up with a slap. Sejun Park was still a bit groggy. Seeing this, Mr. Rabbit indicated to him that the blue moon had already ended. Reflecting on last night's experience, Sejun Park almost thought he was going to die. His spring onion coat was gone, and on the other side, Mrs. Rabbit had found something to cover Sejun Park with, currently shivering from the cold. Once the rabbit couple got the fire going, Sejun Park warmed up considerably. Mrs. Rabbit handed him some grilled fish which he ate. Sejun Park didn't understand how he was still alive. Thinking too much was useless, Sejun Park had decided all he could do was eat well and survive. Just then, Mr. Rabbit excitedly ran over, chattering at Sejun Park. Seeing this, he was very curious, and followed Mr. Rabbit to the vegetable garden. At this point, the cherry tomatoes had grown and matured, radiating a crystalline glow. Seeing this, Sejun Park could hardly believe his eyes, because in just one day, the cherry tomatoes had grown so much. Although the cherry tomatoes were beautiful and fresh, what surprised him was, the cherry tomatoes were actually blue. Just as Sejun Park was considering whether they were ripe, a system notification appeared before him, indicating that he had achieved the feat of hard harvesting fruits imbued with the energy of the blue moon. The system displayed that Sejun Park's arrival here was due to a mistake by the Black Tower administrator. Seeing this, Sejun Park immediately shouted at the system, demanding the administrator send him out, but the administrator was in a dilemma about whether to kill him to cover up the mistake. This was met with strong objections from Sejun Park. Perhaps feeling guilty, the Black Tower's administrator granted Sejun Park his awakening, which meant he was about to officially become an awakened within the Black Tower. Sejun Park was looking forward to what class he would receive, hoping for his favorite, a wizard. But when the Black Tower's administrator made the decision, Sejun Park was stunned, as he had awakened as an F-class farmer. Although the job traits in front of him seemed useful, he simply couldn't accept being a farmer. Feeling annoyed, he was about to smash the cherry tomatoes on the ground, but seeing the little rabbits below, Sejun Park stopped himself, because this was the fruit of their collective labor. Seeing the scared look on the rabbit family, Sejun Park calmed down and looked again at the blue cherry tomatoes in his hand, realizing he shouldn't vent his frustration on the tomatoes, as they were the result of their hard work. Maybe being a farmer wasn't so bad after all, and Sejun Park asked the rabbits to go farming together. At that moment, a circle of light emerged from the cherry tomato in his hand. Reading the description that appeared, Sejun Park realized that this cherry tomato was not normal. It was not only very tasty but also had the miraculous effect of permanently increasing magic energy. Now Sejun Park also realized that the cherry tomato was actually an item, and although it could only increase magic energy by 0.05, this was still surprising. Meanwhile, the Black Tower's administrator was staring intently at Sejun Park's vegetable garden. Looking at the fresh cherry tomatoes in the garden, its stomach couldn't stop growling. Sejun Park in the garden was thanking the little rabbits for their help. If it weren't for their help, the garden wouldn't have developed to this point. However, their joy was cut short when the system notification came again, assigning a new mission to Sejun Park. The mission reward was a job skill, but the cost of refusal was death. Sejun Park was momentarily so frightened that he trembled all over. Although it was called a mission, to him, it felt more like a threat. Worried about the cost of refusal, Sejun Park offered the cherry tomato to the Black Tower's administrator. The next second, the cherry tomato disappeared, and his mission was successfully completed. Since it was written that the mission reward was a job skill, Sejun Park was eager to know what it was. He acquired a level 1 sewing skill. This mundane skill disappointed Sejun Park, but since his profession was a farmer, the sewing skill seemed appropriate. Fortunately, having awakened to his profession, he could now also gain experience points from fishing. There were many piranhas in the pond, but he didn't plan to catch them all at once to level up. Instead, he decided to catch as much as he needed to eat. After grilling all the piranhas, Sejun Park loudly called over the rabbits. All of the rabbits came running, and after distributing the young rabbit share, the 2 largest fish were given to the rabbit couple. Now awakened with his profession, he also saw the rabbit couple's identity. Their original name was White Farmer Bunnies. They were better at farming than fighting. Sejun Park guessed that they must have lost their farm, which is why they wandered here. He wished he could understand rabbit language. At least then he could chat with them. After eating, Sejun Park stood up with enthusiasm, today being a big day for their farm. The rabbit couple also happily responded to Sejun Park. At this moment, their vegetable garden was thriving. The small cherry tomatoes had now become full-grown large cherry tomatoes. Looking at the normally colored cherry tomatoes, Sejun Park's eyes were filled with anticipation. The little rabbits felt exactly the same as he did. After working so hard for so long, it was finally time to harvest. Under the rabbit's eager gaze, Sejun Park's hands trembled as he reached out, and then he picked the very first cherry tomato. Moreover, by picking the right magic cherry tomatoes, Sejun Park gained 10 experience points. However, their effect was somewhat inferior to the blue cherry tomatoes. Eating them no longer permanently increased magic energy but temporarily granted magic energy by 0.1 for 10 minutes, stacking up to 10 times. Seeing this, Sejun Park looked at the other cherry tomatoes, curious if all the rest were the same. As he had thought, all the ripe cherry magic tomatoes were consistent. Picking unripe cherry tomatoes granted less experience points. Because of this, Sejun Park understood that only the ripe small tomatoes were items, while the unripe ones were just regular food. Afterwards, Sejun Park picked a bunch of ripe cherry tomatoes, and his level increased to 4. After the busy work, Sejun Park was eager to taste the cherry tomatoes, but the rabbit family beside him expressed their dissatisfaction. Seeing this, Sejun Park hurriedly apologized to the little rabbits, as it was a collective effort, and he shouldn't enjoy it alone. Sejun Park offered the cherry tomatoes, and Mr. Rabbit finally calmed down. After dividing the cherry tomatoes, Sejun Park and the rabbits began to enjoy this delicacy. The juicy tenderness of the cherry tomatoes made the rabbits very happy, and Sejun Park popped a cherry tomato into his mouth. Chewing it carefully, the sour and sweet taste of the fruit and vegetable made him feel as if he were in the midst of summer fireworks. Watching Sejun Park tear up, the rabbit couple shook their heads, puzzled by his reaction. After eating the cherry tomatoes, the little rabbits went back to work. They used spring onions to create a storage point for the tomatoes. tomatoes. Sejun Park felt reassured because the little rabbits had learned to help the adults. He had also worked hard today, so he put on a homemade eye mask and prepared to sleep. But before he could fall asleep, the Black Tower administrator sent another mission. This time, the mission required him to turn in 100 magic cherry tomatoes, but Sejun Park didn't want to deal with it and turned over to continue his sleep. Seeing this, the Black Tower's administrator frantically sent reminders, forcing Sejun Park to wake up. After collecting the cherry tomatoes, the Black Tower's administrator left satisfied, and Sejun Park reluctantly opened the mission reward. What he got was a harvesting skill. Initially, Sejun Park thought it was just a regular skill, but when he continued working the next day, he found that for a farmer like him, harvesting was practically a divine skill. The still unripe or overripe cherry tomatoes, when harvested by him, would automatically turn into magic cherry tomatoes. This way, Sejun Park didn't need to wait for the cherry tomatoes to ripen, and the harvesting speed was much faster. Just as he and the little rabbits were preparing to rest, the Black Tower's administrator issued another mission to turn in 200 magic cherry tomatoes, and this time, there was no reward. Although Sejun Park had anticipated that the administrator would come back, he didn't expect that there would be no reward this time. Thinking that the administrator had given him a useful skill, Sejun Park once again handed over the cherry tomatoes, but Mr. Rabbit next to him was very dissatisfied. After that, the administrator's required quantity of magic cherry tomatoes increased each time, showing no signs of moderation, and the assignments became even more frequent, until the number rose to 500 magic cherry tomatoes. Sejun Park was stunned. He had not expected the other side to be this greedy. This time, Sejun Park decisively refused to hand over the magic cherry tomatoes. Hearing his response, the Black Tower's administrator was somewhat at a loss, as this was the first time Sejun Park had resisted the administrator's task. The greedy Black Tower administrator not only took their fruits of labor, but also gave no reward. This made Sejun Park very angry. We need to sustain our livelihood too. After all, a litter of little rabbits doesn't eat small amounts. Isn't this too excessive? But the Black Tower's administrator said that was Sejun Park's problem, not his, and demanded that he quickly hand over the magic cherry tomatoes. Hearing this, Sejun Park grew even angrier. These are the fruits of my hard labor over several days. The administrator thought he was making a big deal out of nothing. Sejun Park's last bit of patience was depleted, and this time he chose to refuse and then turned away, ignoring the messages from the other side. Seeing this, the administrator started to panic. In the following days, Sejun Park minded his own business, selectively ignoring the administrator's messages. Even though the administrator threatened to kill Sejun Park, he did not care at all. He did not want to share the fruits with someone who reaped without sowing. The administrator, however, thought it was Sejun Park's duty, that he must unconditionally obey the administrator's orders. Sejun Park sighed softly. This is exactly why I don't want to give. You forcibly dragged me here and do not recognize the efforts I've put into my work, and you give almost no rewards. Despite being the tower's administrator, you are just a heartless employer. Hearing Sejun Park's words, it was a shock for the administrator, because no one had ever dared to speak to him like that before, leaving him somewhat bewildered. Did I do something wrong? After that, the proud dragon could only carefully utter an apology, but before he could finish, he saw Sejun Park sneaking some cherry tomatoes through the crystal ball. Seeing this, he became very angry and loudly urged Sejun Park to complete the task quickly, or else he would eliminate him. Sejun Park sneaked a glance and said, I'll give you 5 this time, the rest later, because the little rabbits were fighting over the food. In the next instant, the cherry tomatoes were taken away. The administrator proudly stated that it would let it go this time, but not to expect such leniency in the future, then happily left. From this, Sejun Park speculated that the Black Tower's administrator might be an incredibly naive individual. Today was the 91st day, which is also the night of the 4th blue moon. With the experience from the previous 2 times, Sejun Park was fully prepared. He not only made a cloak, but also made a pair of earmuffs. He also ate the cherry tomatoes, increasing his magic ability, which he believed could protect against the monster's roars. However, he still hoped that the incident from last time would not happen again. As the sun was eclipsed by the moon, a blue moonlight shone on the cherry tomatoes, and Sejun Park was mesmerized, as this was the first time he had seen plants absorb moonlight. At the same time, he noticed the cherry tomatoes undergoing changes. The cherry tomatoes made a whooshing sound as they evolved into blue cherry tomatoes. At the same time, the sweet potatoes nearby also showed unusual activity. Could it be that sweet potatoes can also absorb moonlight? Driven by curiosity, Sejun Park quickly ran over and threw aside the soil covering them. Seeing this, Sejun Park was astounded. The previous sweet potatoes had evolved into a mighty sweet potato with blue moon energy. Its attributes were different from the cherry tomatoes. It increased strength ability. This was followed by a series of level up prompts. He picked the blue cherry tomatoes, holding a cherry tomato in his left hand and a mighty sweet potato in his right. Sejun Park felt like he owned the world. Just then, a mission panel appeared again, and Sejun Park expected this to happen. Unexpectedly, however, 2 tasks came simultaneously, one asking for for the blue cherry tomato, the other asking for the blue mighty sweet potato. This time the punishment of death seemed a bit harsh. It seems if I refuse, I might really be dealt with. But Sejun Park came prepared with a strategy, which was to complete the previous task first. After collecting the several hundred cherry tomatoes he hadn't given last time, the administrator was joyous, but then looked at Sejun Park with a puzzled face, questioning if he was secretly plotting other plans. Sejun Park stated he wouldn't give them to the administrator this time. So, the administrator warned that he must give the blue cherry tomatoes and blue mighty sweet potatoes next time, then left satisfied. Looking at the blue cherry tomato and blue mighty sweet potato in his hands, he contemplated on what to do next. In this case, they obviously had to go into his own mouth. Sejun Park chewed the blue cherry tomato with a face full of enjoyment, and the next instant his whole body suddenly trembled with excitement. This rich, refreshing sweet taste, it was like a celebration in his mouth. Unable to bear it, he decided to roast the mighty sweet potato too, although it was a pity without aluminum foil, but fortunately he had versatile onion leaves. By the next morning, the solar eclipse had ended. The rabbit couple peeked out to check, because they smelled a delicious fragrance, then looked on smacking their lips behind Sejun Park. They came just at the right time. The roasted sweet potatoes infused with blue moon energy produced an enticing aroma. Seeing this, the little rabbits drooled. Just as Sejun Park was about to give the sweet potatoes to the little rabbits, Mr. Rabbit suddenly stepped in front of him and cooed at the little rabbits to stop, trying to explain something to the rabbit family. Sejun Park understood Mr. Rabbit's intentions. Mr. Rabbit thought there was only one mighty sweet potato, so he wanted Sejun Park to enjoy it by himself. Seeing this, Sejun Park was deeply moved, but he dared not tell Mr. Rabbit that he had already sneaked eating a mighty sweet potato earlier. Sejun Park couldn't wait and took a bite, but he burned his mouth and started screaming in pain as he flung the mighty sweet potato onto the ground. Mr. Rabbit started to panic, but just as he was about to reach out to the mighty sweet potato on the ground, the little rabbits were even quicker. Before Mr. Rabbit could react, the little ones had already put it in their mouths. Unfortunately, the inside of the sweet potato was still hot. The little rabbits immediately spat out the mighty sweet potato, but they still burned their mouths and then started crying in pain. Luckily, the rabbits weren't hurt. The only pity was the delicious roasted sweet potato wasted on the ground. Seeing the roasted sweet potato on the ground, Sejun Park also realized that the current resources were not enough to sustain 8 mouths, so he decided to expand the cultivation of sweet potatoes. It was precisely the sweet potato stems that the little rabbits were munching on, so he declared temporarily banning eating sweet potato stems. Hearing this, the little rabbits were upset. They began to cry and make a fuss. However, Sejun Park was not swayed by this, as they would not stop eating all day, and it wouldn't take long for these little ones to eat everything. To this, Sejun Park had an offer. If you help me plant sweet potato stems, as a reward, we'll eat tastier roasted sweet potatoes for dinner, and I can give you some special snacks. Hearing about the special snacks, the little rabbits drooled all over and they started planted the sweet potatoes in an orderly manner. The eldest, strong and powerful, was responsible for digging holes. The second and third took care of planting. The fourth was the runner, and the youngest, the fifth, had it relatively easy, only needing to arrange the sweet potato sprouts. Just then, the fifth rabbit looked at the tender sweet potato leaves and his stomach started growling, thinking maybe no one would see him sneak a bite. The next second, Mr. Rabbit slapped him down, as if to say, "You little rascal, working yet sneaking food." On the other side, Sejun Park was picking cherry tomatoes because he wanted to make special snacks. Just then, his information panel kept popping up, and Sejun Park's level was upgraded from Farmer F to E. Afterward, he strung the cherry tomatoes on fish bones, making them easier to roast later. Meanwhile, the Black Tower's administrator was proudly watching Sejun Park's actions, but when Sejun Park turned around, it hid. However, Sejun Park still noticed it. It must have been spying. Moments later, the barbecued cherry tomatoes were ready and Sejun Park called out to the rabbits. Hearing this, the little rabbits immediately stopped their farm work and hopped towards Sejun Park. The freshly made barbecued cherry tomato bone skewers, stringing the tomatoes on clean piranha bones, made the fruit even sweeter and softer. The little rabbits couldn't help drooling over the barbecued cherry tomato skewers. Then Sejun Park reminded them not to be hasty, as the food was very hot just out of the fire. Seeing that the sweet potato sprouts were almost all planted, it was also time for him to prepare tonight's dinner. He then pulled out a matured mighty sweet potato, surprised to find it had produced 5 potatoes. The description states that consuming them would dissolve 10 g of fat and increase strength ability by 0.1 for 10 minutes. After harvesting a total of 15 mighty sweet potatoes, Sejun Park saw some sweet potato leaves nearby that did not look well. He didn't want to waste any, and so he still planted it. Just then, the information panel popped up again. Because Sejun Park had obtained the sowing skill, planting through himself would improve plant survival rates. He hadn't expected this to count towards the sowing skill. It seems I must do all the planting myself to improve familiarity. He then quickly signaled the little rabbits to stop stop and took over the rest of the planting himself. Meanwhile, the administrator was fiddling with something in the room, carefully skewering cherry tomatoes and then trying to roast them over the fire like Sejun Park. Moments later, bit into them but spat them all out, not expecting them to be so bitter. It turned out it had forgotten to remove the charred skin. At the same time, the administrator was also very curious about what Sejun Park was doing, but was surprised to find Sejun Park happily eating roasted mighty sweet potatoes. Seeing this, it was very dissatisfied. How dare you guys eat roasted sweet potatoes behind the great black dragon Aileen Pratani. Subsequently, Sejun Park received a task prompt. Please offer one roasted sweet potato to the Black Tower's administrator. Refusal means death. This stunned Sejun Park, who then turned his head to refuse. Seeing the administrator's anxious reaction, Sejun Park casually said, "There's only one left. Don't you think you should offer a reward?" The administrator, not caring about formalities anymore, quickly modified the task. This time it added an occupational ability as a reward to the task. Sejun Park was very pleased with this, saying, "Then I'll offer you one." Subsequently, Sejun Park eagerly opened the reward. "Congratulations, you have acquired the seed shop ability. When used, the ability will allow you to purchase items from the seed shop once every 30 days. Sejun Park excitedly stood up. Having a store meant he could buy other things. He immediately activated the skill, but at that moment, Sejun Park remembered he had no money. Meanwhile, the information box prompted, "Since this is your first time using the store, you are awarded 1 dungeon coin." With a ding, Sejun Park money was deposited. The store transactions were in dungeon coins, with 1 dungeon coin being equivalent to about 10,000 won. Due to new user permissions, he could only display 3 items and was only allowed to purchase one of them. Looking at the seeds that are purchasable, Sejun Park fell into thought, feeling some seeds were not very useful, so only carrots were left. The little rabbits all looked at Sejun Park, making noises beside him. "Do you guys want to eat carrots?" The rabbit couple drooled, their ears involuntarily twitching, and upon hearing this, their ears made flapping noises. Sejun Park also found it very amusing, addictively repeating carrots, and Mr. Rabbit could no longer bear it and immediately delivered a flying kick. Sejun Park then purchased carrot seeds, which the rabbits looked forward to eagerly, and even the administrator was very satisfied. Next, they would plant the newly purchased seeds. At the same time, a little bee was quietly approaching Sejun Park. As Sejun Park purchased the carrot seeds, the rabbit couple anticipated them daily, even staying in the vegetable garden after meals. Since that's the case, let them watch. Sejun Park decided to rest first, because he had to manually pollinate the cherry tomatoes in the afternoon. Just as Sejun Park had just laid down, he heard a buzzing sound next to his ear. Despite his efforts to shoo it away, insects continued to fly around him, and even the little rabbits couldn't sleep. He was very annoyed. Where are these insects flying around from? Then, a little bee appeared in front of him. The little bee looked at him curiously, as she had never seen a human before. Sejun Park was so in awe that he couldn't speak. "Is this a little bee sent by the heavens in answer to my prayers? It's too cute." Just as Sejun Park thought he had gained a little worker, her information panel popped up. "You have encountered a poisonous honey bee, extremely dangerous." This scared Sejun Park into trembling. Then, he turned back to ask the rabbit couple to confirm if it was dangerous, but the rabbit couple had already run away with their children. Sejun Park yelled, "So she is dangerous, isn't she? How could you leave me alone to run away?" The next information was even more terrifying. The poisonous honey bee is carnivorous, uses its stinger to hunt monsters, and devours their flesh. The poisonous honey bee's stinger is extremely dangerous, and you must avoid it. Sejun Park quickly signaled her not to come closer. "I don't taste good. I'm just skin and bones." It was this behavior that angered her. At this critical moment, Sejun Park grabbed a nearby tomato flower. "Don't eat me, eat this instead." Seeing the fresh flower, the little honeybee surprisingly calmed down. She seemed very interested in the flower. Then, the little honeybee moved closer and sniffed the flower. Sejun Park, seeing her quiet, cautiously glanced at her. She seemed to really like Sejun Park's flower, even burying half her head in it. Watching the smile on her face, it was hard to imagine she was a carnivorous bee. Just then, Sejun Park remembered that he still had to manually pollinate the small tomatoes. He mustered up the courage to communicate with the little bee. "If you feel hungry, you might try the fresh flowers behind." The little honeybee quickly became immersed in the field of flowers. Sejun Park was very pleased. "This way, I don't need to go out of my way to pollinate the small tomatoes myself. I must say, I am a genius." The little rabbits were hiding behind a rock, and Sejun Park saw them, saying, "Do you have the face to come back? You left me alone to run away." Hearing this, the little rabbits pulled out their best act of being cute. Meanwhile, the little honeybee flew back to Sejun Park, scaring him so much that he collapsed on the rock. The little honeybee landed directly on him, then stretched out lazily, and unexpectedly, she fell asleep. "But will her stinger really not sting me?" Thus, Sejun Park's farm gained another family member. Time quickly moved on to the 120th day, and with the help of the little honeybee, the yield of the cherry tomatoes also increased. The little honeybee was very diligent, arriving at the farm early in the morning to work, then returning to the woods outside the cave at night, presumably back to her own beehive. alive. Sejun Park's dinner also got an upgrade as the little honeybee added honey, making the taste of the spring onions much better. The scene shifts to the next day, the day of the 4th blue moon, and Sejun Park had made early preparations, and his lucky outfit had also been upgraded. But what puzzled him was that the little rabbits were particularly noisy today. Just as Sejun Park signaled them to hurry back to their home, the rabbit couple was holding the little rabbits, seemingly encouraging them. The next instant, the rabbit couple quickly left, leaving Sejun Park staring in shock. Then they waved at Sejun Park as if to say good luck. Confused, Sejun Park did not know what was about to happen, but his intuition told him that something bad was going to occur. The solar eclipse had already started. Then, Sejun Park slowly turned his head to look, only to see the adorable little rabbits grow huge and each started showing their claws and teeth. Just when Sejun Park thought the little rabbits were about to attack him, a rainbow light suddenly glowed. When the light dispersed, pairs of cute little rabbit ears appeared, and the little rabbits had turned into white and black. At that moment, he understood that this was the little rabbit's coming-of-age ceremony. The scene shifts to the next day, and the rabbit couple was also happy that their children had grown up. Meanwhile, the eldest stretched out its palm and cooed. The next instant, a shovel appeared in the eldest's hand. Seeing this, Sejun Park was shocked. It turned out that once they grow into adult farmer white rabbits, they could obtain their own awakened tools, which obviously couldn't be borrowed. The eldest awoke to a shovel, the second inherited Mr. Rabbit's watering can, the third got a cart, and the fourth a sickle. Only the fifth was an exception. His name was Black Warrior Bunny, because his awakened tool was a hammer, and his profession was not a farmer, but a warrior. The little rabbit was also very satisfied with his profession. The scene shifts again, and everyone started to work. The second followed Mr. Rabbit in charge of watering, the fourth followed Mrs. Rabbit in cutting the spring onions. The eldest was responsible for loosening the soil for the plants, and with the third's cart, transporting the small tomatoes became much easier. Watching the once little rabbits gradually grow up and being able to help their parents, Sejun Park felt very gratified. However, there was still a fifth one, who became the only unemployed rabbit in the tower, since the warrior's role was to protect the farm. But here inside the cave, there were no monsters that threatened their livelihood. He couldn't let the fifth feel useless. Just then, the fifth rabbit suddenly thought of something and then started pointing at the fish pond behind them, making excited noises. Sejun Park understood what he was trying to convey. They could use the hammer to catch fish. As long as he drew the fish out, the fifth rabbit would be responsible for catching them. Sejun Park began to try this. Just then, a big fish leaped out, and the fifth rabbit timed it perfectly, striking the big fish hard with the hammer. The fifth, being a warrior, was indeed agile, but tonight's food was doomed, as it turned into fish paste, and Black Warrior Bunny was oblivious. Adhering to the principle of not wasting food, tonight's meal was fish paste, but looking at the mushy fish meat, everyone lost their appetite. After a busy day, it was unfortunate to have them eat this, making the other little rabbits very angry, and Sejun Park could only come out to comfort the poor fifth. Just practice more, and you'll get the hang of it. Thus, as the rabbits gradually got used to their roles, the seed store opened again, and Sejun Park was eager. But the next second, he was stunned because the prices of the seeds had increased significantly from the first time. Now all his wealth was 0.9 dungeon coins, and he could only afford sticky corn seeds. He must find a way to earn more money. There are 3 known ways to earn dungeon coins inside the tower. First, by receiving rewards for clearing floors. Second, by hunting monsters and selling valuable monster bodies to peddlers. Third, by completing tasks for rewards. Among these methods, clearing floors is impossible for Sejun Park, who can't leave the cave entrance, so only the last method remains. He then signaled to the administrator to ask if the reward could be changed to dungeon coins, but the administrator seemed not to know what dungeon coins are, though it said it could give someone it grew up. Sejun Park felt somewhat disheartened. How long would that take? The administrator generously told him about 300 years. It seems this method won't work either. He should focus on how to survive for now. Because of the dungeon coin issue, he could only choose corn seeds. The next moment, a pouch magically appeared, containing golden, plump corn seeds. Seeing this, everyone became more spirited, but before that, they needed to fill their stomachs. After a while, everyone had eaten their fill, but there were still a few grilled fish left, which Sejun Park planned to dry and store. The little honeybee, who hadn't come around for several days, stuck close to Sejun Park when she saw him. Just then, the little honeybee suddenly felt something approaching, and the rabbits also prepared for battle, which scared Sejun Park. Could it be a monster? Suddenly, a cat paw reached out. "Don't be nervous, I'm not a bad cat." Sejun Park was also very curious about what the cat was doing here. It jumped down and extended its pink and tender paw. "I am Teo, a peddler." Just like that, Sejun Park unexpectedly stumbled upon a lucky cat, and this was also the first time he met a peddler. However, he hadn't expected it to be a cat. Those big round eyes, chubby cheeks, and soft paws were just too much. As a cat lover, Sejun Park couldn't resist, but he had to suppress his urge to pet the cat. It turns out, the little cat Teo knew that Sejun Park was new to the seed shop community, so he came to greet Sejun Park and do a bit of business. Sejun Park was also also curious about what goods Teo might have. But just then, the cat's stomach started growling, and he apologized, saying he hadn't eaten much on the way, not expecting to get hungry before starting the business. Seeing this, Sejun Park grinned. Since you're here to do business with me, I should make a profit first. He then pulled out a grilled fish. Do you want to eat? Seeing this, the cat couldn't help but drool, his big bell-like eyes showing true love. The cat hesitated for a moment, followed by a refusal. For Sejun Park, this was an easy win. Don't you want to try how delicious this grilled fish smells? Under Sejun Park's temptation, the cat finally succumbed to the allure. The cat had quite a big appetite, devouring 5 grilled fish in one go, filling its stomach to the brim. The cat thanked Sejun Park, who smiled and said, "It's I who should be thanking you." The cat then took out his goods, but Sejun Park interrupted him. "Before that, pay for the grilled fish first. That'll be 0.5 dungeon coins." The newly debuted cat didn't know the harshness of society. "Wasn't it you who invited me to eat?" Sejun Park countered. "There's no such thing as a free lunch in the world. You're not planning to eat the fish and then run away, are you? That depends on whether my friends here agree or not." Overwhelmed by the numbers against him, the cat could only tearfully empty its pockets. The cat felt it shouldn't suffer a loss for nothing, so it then encouraged Sejun Park to take a look at its treasures, confidently introducing its rare items. "This flask has been enchanted with preservation magic. Whether you pour something hot or cold into it, it can maintain the temperature indefinitely. And this mini fan has been enchanted with wind magic." Just then, Sejun Park interrupted it, bluntly stating, "The things you've brought are actually just junk." For this, the cat became very angry. "These are rare items I've procured from outside the tower. You might not recognize their value." Sejun Park spoke unhurriedly. "They don't have any magic," making the cat doubt its decisions. Then, Sejun Park told it, "There's no magic on them. The principle of the vacuum flask is to isolate it from contact with the air outside, thus preventing heat loss. The mini electric fan and the portable heater will stop working if accidentally left on, as the battery will run out." But the cat clearly didn't believe what Sejun Park said. Skaram explicitly said they were enchanted. Just then, the mini fan ran out of battery and stopped spinning. "This is the truth behind what you bought," Sejun Park said. At this, the cat finally believed Sejun Park. "That damn dirty goblin Skaram." The cat burst into tears. "Why am I always deceived?" Seeing this, Sejun Park stepped forward to comfort him. "If you don't mind, can you tell me what happened?" Thus, the cat shared the sorrows it had kept in its heart. It was originally a member of the neutral zone on the 75th floor and had long adored Meryl, the village of Grainier's most beautiful cat. It had saved up small fish to confess its love, but Meryl was very dissatisfied with his cheap fish, slapped it to the ground, and treated Teo with indifference. Just then, Oren, the rich young master of the village, appeared. He simply brought out a salmon, which captivated Meryl instantly. "What cheap stuff dare you bring as a gift? It should at least be a fine salmon." And this stunned Teo, because even if he emptied his savings, he couldn't afford one. Just like that, Meryl was whisked away by the rich second generation. Teo couldn't believe that his childhood friend would abandon him, asking, "Can you look into my eyes and swear? Were our memories not real?" Hearing this, Meryl lowered her head, and the next moment, she showed her sharp cat claws, saying, "I just gave you a few smiles, and you kept pestering me. I hate cats that reek of cheap fish like you." This made Teo start to question his life. So, he left that sorrowful place and became the peddler he is now. After registering as a peddler with 50 dungeon coins, he intended to use the remaining 5 coins to buy goods, but he unexpectedly met Skaram. Under his influence, Teo believed the lie about obtaining rare items outside the tower. With high hopes and an empty stomach, he arrived here, only to be told that he had bought a pile of junk and spent his last bit of money, and then he broke down crying. Sejun Park could see that he was really a prime sucker. Just then, he had a flash of inspiration, thinking of a win-win solution. He then suggested that Teo eat 2 grilled fish to calm down, but the cat, fearful of being tricked again, said, "You're probably waiting to ask for money after I finish eating, aren't you?" "I'm not a fool." Sejun Park offered them for free, and hearing this, the cat's eyes widened. "Really? But there's one condition." Just like that, Sejun Park found a sucker, or rather, a partner. Teo was puzzled by Sejun Park's proposal to partner up, seeing himself as a useless rookie peddler, but Sejun Park thought he was still very capable. After all, being able to find himself a quality partner proved that Teo was quite lucky. Next came the formal negotiations with the little cat Teo. Sejun Park then called over the rabbits, and soon, the rabbits arrived with a small cart. Sejun Park comfortably lay on it. Now that Teo had no startup capital, they decided to earn more money through collaboration. Teo was very satisfied with the idea, feeling it was a great opportunity to start anew. Sejun Park also looked forward to earning more dungeon coins through this collaboration, aiming to enhance the farm's productivity and scale. The counterfeit goods wouldn't sell, so Sejun Park suggested a plan to Teo, which was to sell goods for him. A portion of the sales profit would be given to Teo as a bonus. However, Teo did not understand what he meant about the bonus. Hearing this, Sejun Park patiently explained, "You can set your own prices for the goods, and no matter what price they sell at, I will give you a 3 to 5% share in dungeon coins." After the explanation, Teo understood the situation, but felt the percent share was not in his favor, so he did not respond to Sejun Park. Sejun Park understood his reluctance and immediately had the little rabbits bring over his secret weapon. Seeing the line of roasted fish in front of him, Taeo's eyes bulged. Seeing this, Sejun Park struck while the iron was hot, telling Taeo, if the collaboration is successful, not only will you get a share, but you'll also receive 10 grilled fish or an equivalent amount in dungeon coins every week. Hearing this offer and smelling the fragrant grilled fish, Taeo couldn't help but drool. But remembering his past experiences of being deceived, he felt he couldn't agree to Sejun Park's proposal. However, tears were already streaming down Taeo's cheeks. There was no helping it. Cats find it hard to resist roasted fish. Slowly wiping away his drool. If you can give 20 grilled fish, I might consider the collaboration. Sejun Park decisively took out 20 grilled fish and promised to add 5 more. Upon hearing this, Taeo could no longer hold out, as that was a total of 25 grilled fish. In addition, Sejun Park offered special benefits. Besides the weekly salary, as long as you come here, you can eat grilled fish to your heart's content without spending a penny. Hearing Sejun Park's words, little cat Taeo's heart couldn't stop pounding. After getting Taeo's agreement, they officially began their collaboration. Sejun Park prepared to sign a contract with Taeo, and Taeo even provided the paper and pen himself. Soon, Sejun Park had written all the terms of the contract, and Taeo and he decisively pressed their paw and handprints on it. Now that the signing was complete, Sejun Park hugged his new partner with relief, while Taeo finally realized what had happened. In his excitement, he had unconsciously pressed his paw print without thoroughly reading the content. Just as Taeo tried to grab the contract paper, it had already floated away. Subsequently, the contract between them was formed. As long as both parties agreed, the Black Tower would facilitate this collaboration. Sejun Park had heard about this feature of the Black Tower before, but he hadn't expected it to take effect in this way. Meanwhile, Taeo was full of regret, as this was his first contract. To this, Sejun Park said, "You'll understand in time." Then he tried to high-five the little cat, but was rebuffed by the annoyed Taeo, because it's still uncertain whether we can continue to cooperate. After all, it was clearly written in the first clause that if he didn't perform well, the contract would become void. Hearing this, Sejun Park employed the irresistible head patting on the little cat, which made Taeo floaty with happiness. After confirming the collaboration, Taeo asked what products he needed to sell. So, Sejun Park took him to the farm and picked a cherry tomato to indicate this is the product that needs to be sold. After a brief inspection, Taeo understood that it was an item that increased magic ability, which could be sold to the recently awakened in the tower for 0.01 dungeon coin each. Sejun Park set minimum price at 0.05 dungeon coin, which made Taeo somewhat doubtful, but upon reflection, he thought this might be good for him. According to the contract, if he failed to meet the target, not only could he keep the grilled fish, but he could also break the contract outright. Thinking this, Taeo actively inquired about how much he needed to take to sell. Sejun Park had already had the little rabbits bring them over. A total of 1,000 cherry tomatoes needed to be taken, and this week's 25 roasted fish were also prepared for Taeo. Sejun Park wondered how he would transport the goods, and then Taeo pulled out his bundle, a storage tool enchanted with various magics that could keep items fresh and had a large space. The next second, Taeo threw his bundle out, and once the magic was activated, the small tomatoes and grilled fish were sucked into it. Then it gently landed on the ground. This tool earned continuous praise from Sejun Park. Taeo was already shouldering the bundle, ready to set off, waving goodbye to Sejun Park and heading out to sell the magic-infused small tomatoes. A few days later, on the 38th floor of the Black Tower, a group known as the Phoenix Guild was hunting monsters. With great effort and cooperation, they slew a large spider. As they happily chatted afterwards, a rustling sound came from the bushes behind Dongshik, the team leader. Hearing the noise, the man turned around to see Taeo signaling that he was there for trade. Just when the group thought it might be some hidden ferocious beast, Taeo stepped out with his cat-like tread. The group of Awakened recognized Taeo as a peddler, and Taeo adhered to the contract by using Meowish language. This adorable manner endeared him to a group of girls. Now, Taeo understood why Sejun Park had added this condition. Indeed, as soon as he spoke, he was well received. Taeo did not hesitate and immediately pulled out the magic cherry tomatoes. At first glance, the crowd lost interest, but Taeo then urged them to check their information panels. Upon doing so, they realized it was an item that could increase magic ability by 0.01 for 10 minutes. However, when they heard that each was priced at 0.05 dungeon coins, they hesitated again. Some thought Taeo was crazy and were about to leave. However, one of the girls stared intently at the information, which clearly stated that consuming one could dissolve 10 grams of fat and could be reused. Hearing the girl's words, the others who were about to leave stopped in their tracks. To Taeo's astonishment, those previously uninterested were now eager to buy the tomatoes in large quantities. Even the team members without body concerns decided to purchase some. Meanwhile, in the cave, Sejun Park was working hard with Mrs. Rabbit. Although the magic cherry tomatoes only slightly increased magic ability, the fact that they could dissolve 10 grams of fat without side effects would surely appeal to the those looking to lose weight. Additionally, they tasted very good. Sejun Park was convinced that the magic cherry tomatoes would be a big hit. Just as he had thought, the 1,000 magic cherry tomatoes he brought out sold out in just a few minutes. Teo crouched on the ground in disbelief, as this was the first time he had made so much money. While the little cat was out, Sejun Park and the rabbits planted carrot seeds. Many days later, these seeds had all sprouted young shoots. However, out of the 1,000 seeds obtained, only about 700 survived. The seeds extracted from the magic cherry tomatoes did not all germinate either. The same was true for the corn seeds and sweet potato stems. Even with Sejun Park personal planting, the germination rate was only around 60%. He thought this result might be due to his low farmer level, or perhaps the soil inside the cave was not fertile enough. Now that he had found a way to earn dungeon coins, he planned to work even harder at planting. Just as Sejun Park and Mr. Rabbit were full of fighting spirit, a loud noise came from behind them. It turned out to be Black Warrior Bunny, who was fishing in style. He lured a large number of piranhas with a torch, and in the next second, Black Bunny raised his hammer and stunned all the fish in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, Sejun Park praised Black Bunny's fishing skills. Having caught a large number of fish, Black Bunny began to glow, a sign of leveling up. Seeing this, Sejun Park was greatly relieved. The white rabbits gained experience through farming, while the little black rabbit leveled up for the first time through hunting. Always the least useful Black Bunny on the farm, he finally got to show off in front of his brothers, although he was quickly reprimanded by the eldest white rabbit. During a break, Sejun Park began rummaging through his bag, quickly pulling out the vacuum flask that Teo had brought, and inside it, he found a few packets of leftover coffee. He felt grateful to Teo and Skaram, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to enjoy coffee in the Black Tower. Sejun Park then tore open a packet of coffee powder and poured it into a water bottle. Although he had no sugar, fortunately, there was honey from the little honey bee. Soon, a unique honey Americano was ready. After a hearty sip, Sejun Park felt an unprecedented satisfaction. Seeing the little rabbits looking interested, he passed the coffee to them. However, just after a sip, Black Warrior Bunny's face drastically changed, and he spat out all the coffee. The rest of the little rabbits also couldn't adapt to the bitterness of the coffee. Just then, Sejun Park heard a buzzing sound, turned around, and called to the little honey bee. The bee happily responded to Sejun Park. Watching the direction the bee flew, Sejun Park noticed that there was an additional beehive there. The little honey bee had moved its home inside the cave. But while Sejun Park and the little honey bee were happily interacting, a task from the Black Tower's administrator was triggered. This time, 10 magic cherry tomatoes were required, and the administrator would be very sad if refused. Seeing that even the threats had disappeared, Sejun Park was secretly delighted. However, he still handed over the magic cherry tomatoes to the administrator, who even thanked Sejun Park, bringing him a moment of relief. The administrator's attitude had changed so much from before. Meanwhile, in a certain part of the Black Tower in a goblin's home, Skaram was drinking with a companion, but suddenly mentioned the little cat Teo. Skaram was convinced that Teo would never sell those junk items. Teo out of money, he would inevitably return to the Peddlers Guild, at which point Skaram would pretend to kindly lend him money as capital, then make him forever a slave to his own interest payments. After drinking, Skaram opened his message board. Today was the day the rankings were updated, and Skaram had successfully squeezed into the top 1,000. The goblins beside him congratulated him, while also wondering when they could make it onto the list. Hearing his companion's praise, Skaram was secretly pleased, having tricked so many naive customers. But when he tried to check the merchants ahead of him, Skaram was filled with disbelief because he found that Teo was ranked ahead of him. Hearing other companions whispering, this made Skaram instantly furious and even more determined to catch Teo and steal his secret of selling goods. Teo's quick return surprised Sejun Park, but a few days later, Teo finally returned to the cave, greeting Sejun Park with great surprise. But this response had Teo mistakenly thought he had been found out, so he slipped and said that he would return immediately after selling goods next time and wouldn't stay to play on other floors. Subsequently, Sejun Park inquired a bit, and Teo honestly confessed that he had played for 4 days because he had said before leaving that he was going to sell goods on the 30-something floors, which should take about 10 days round trip, but it turned out he had 4 days to hang around after selling all the magic cherry tomatoes. Sejun Park initially thought it would take many days to sell the goods, but Teo returned in just 14 days, presumably because he sold all the tomatoes immediately upon arriving. Seeing the little cat continuously apologizing, Sejun Park suddenly grabbed his shoulders, his face mischievously demanding that Teo confess everything. In this manner, the little rabbits and Sejun Park listened to Teo's story. In a short while, he explained the situation and took out all 50 tower coins he had earned. Having received the money, Sejun Park pondered for a moment, then gave 2 dungeon coins to Teo. But what puzzled Teo was that Sejun Park's reference to him had changed to my intern, not Teo the CEO. Sejun Park explained that this was a demotion penalty for Teo, and the commission would go back to 5% once he worked hard to regain the boss position. Seeing this, Teo was not discouraged, but instead confidently stated his determination to work hard and become the CEO again. Now, Sejun Park noticed that Teo often used meow language when speaking, which was initially required by the contract only during business interactions. However, after realizing the benefits, Teo decided to use meow language all the time. Sejun Park thought that this could definitely make the small tomatoes famous worldwide. The information page will label the grower, so people will gradually know that I invented the small tomatoes. But recalling the rules of the Black Tower, Teo was suddenly terrified into silence. In the Black Tower, there is a special feature to protect novice peddlers from having their customers poached, and the section that would indicate Sejun Park as the cultivator would not be indicated as due to Teo's status as a novice peddler. Thinking of this, cold sweat poured down Teo's back. If Sejun Park knew this, he might very well be demoted to an intern again, or worse, fired. Immediately, Teo urgently asked Sejun Park for the magic cherry tomatoes, wanting to start selling right away. Hearing this, Sejun Park told him to rest for a few days, as he had not yet given him his weekly salary. However, Teo took the initiative to pack the magic cherry tomatoes, mumbling about working hard, because to remove the block on displaying the grower's name, he must quickly earn 1,000 dungeon coins and become an intermediate peddler. Watching the excited Teo, Sejun Park and Black Bunny were puzzled. Could it be that he was dazzled by money? The magic cherry tomatoes sold by Teo received high praise from many adventurers, including the Phoenix Guild Master's daughter, who loved the little tomatoes so much that she asked him to bring more next time. Seeing this, Phoenix Guild Master Dongshik shed tears because his daughter had been moody due to unsuccessful dieting, but now she expressed her love for her father, making Dongshik unusually happy for the first time in a while. Other team members were also happy because their crush even agreed to their advances after receiving the magic cherry tomatoes. With his team's response, Dongshik and a few others then began to look for the little cat Teo. A few days later, on the 38th floor, Teo was walking along with a troubled face. His backpack could carry a maximum of 1,500 magic cherry tomatoes at a time, meaning he would have to make more than 10 trips back and forth to earn 1,000 dungeon coins. After a while, Teo arrived at the spot where humans used to gather, but looking around, he couldn't see anyone. Just then, a voice of surprise came from the bushes nearby. Seeing the little cat Teo, they seemed very happy and immediately called out to other companions. It turned out that these people had been waiting here for Teo for 2 whole days, just to buy the magic cherry tomatoes. Hearing this, Teo's mouth dropped open in disbelief. Just as the others were about to pay at the previous price, Teo quickly stopped them. The little cat raised its chubby paws, then said, "The price has gone up now." Hearing the news of the price increase, everyone started to get anxious. Seeing this, Phoenix Guild Master Dongshik asked, "How much has it increased by?" Teo confidently said, "Now it's 0.07 dungeon coins per piece." But his heart was very anxious because such a price increase might mean the tomatoes wouldn't sell. However, the next second, the Phoenix Guild Master didn't hesitate at all and immediately threw a bag of dungeon coins to buy 200 pieces. This surprised Teo so much that he meowed. The other team members also whispered among themselves, "Such a good item. It's normal for the price to be higher, and who knows how long we'll have to wait next time." Thus, everyone began buying in large quantities. In less than a few minutes, all the magic cherry tomatoes Teo brought were sold out. Before leaving, the Phoenix Guild Master asked Teo when he would return here, and upon learning it would be after 10 days, Dongshik nodded in satisfaction, as they could just make it in time. After buying the magic cherry tomatoes, Dongshik gathered his team members to go and slay the spider monster. Hearing that they would come again, Teo couldn't help but secretly rejoice. Having regular customers meant he could soon earn 1,000 dungeon coins. As he fantasized about becoming an intermediate peddler, another group of adventurers greeted Teo. It turned out that Suha recognized Teo because he looked similar to a cat she had before. However, Teo didn't like being called Kitty by several people. Seeing this, Suha quickly apologized. After some conversation, Teo learned that Suha used to have a cat very similar to him. Teo disagreed. "You must be mistaken, meow, because I am the most handsome cat in the world." He then turned and walked away, while Suha quickly pulled out a cat treat. Looking at Suha hopeful and gentle eyes, the Teo said, "I only like grilled fish. I don't care for anything else." But before he could finish, he completely succumbed to the deliciousness in her hand. How could there be something so tasty? It's unbelievably delicious, meow. In just a few seconds, Teo had polished off all the cat treats. Greedy for more, Suha took out many flavors of cat treats, but she had one condition: only if Teo would take a selfie with her will all be given to you. Hearing this, Teo didn't hesitate at all. "Not just one picture. I could pose for a lifetime." Sometime later, Teo left contentedly munching on the cat treats. His teammates were also rarely seen Suha this happy, while Suha, looking at the photos on her phone, was very satisfied and said she would bring cat treats for Teo next time because he was just too adorable. Meanwhile, in the cave, Sejun Park was conducting swimming training for the Black Bunny. He had also sealed the entrance used by the piranhas to ensure safety. The reason for the special training for Black Warrior Bunny was that a few days ago it suddenly floated motionlessly on the surface of the water, which scared Sejun Park so much that he screamed on the spot and Mrs. Rabbit even fainted straight away. Thinking back, he still felt a chill. Black Warrior Bunny didn't seem to care at all. After training all afternoon, Sejun Park now really wanted some sweets. He remembered that the honey prepared by Little Honeybee had already been collected. Since Little Honeybee moved in, it has often been confined within the beehive. Looking up, Sejun Park was surprised by the surroundings of the beehive. The once simple little beehive had not only become bigger but had also produced many little young poisonous honeybee. Seeing this, Sejun Park wondered if these were Little Honeybee's babies. Thinking that he hadn't seen Little Honeybee for a long time, Sejun Park went to prepare a gift for the meeting, as he should at least greet her. After picking some fresh cherry tomato flowers, Sejun Park called out to Little Honeybee outside, but their arrival seemed to have angered the young honeybee. In the next moment, the bees pointed their stingers at Sejun Park and Black Bunny. Inside the beehive, Little Honeybee heard Sejun Park's voice. Black Warrior Bunny immediately pulled out a wooden mallet, unafraid of the young little bees. Just as a conflict was about to erupt, a voice quickly stopped all the young honeybees. When Sejun Park looked up in fear, he saw a large, humanoid honeybee slowly flying towards him. Seeing the bee approaching, he tensed up, ready for the impending change. Sejun Park recognized it instantly. Could this be Little Poisonous Honeybee after leveling up? According to the message prompt, Little Poisonous Honeybee had now become a Queen Poisonous Honeybee. Although it's said that women change as they grow, the transformation of Little Honeybee stunned Sejun Park, and even the manager Black Dragon Aileen was puzzled, as this wasn't what its grandfather had described. The honeybees at Sejun Park's farm didn't eat meat, but sucked nectar from flowers. Now, the Queen Honeybee happily fluttered her wings, confirming to Sejun Park that she was indeed the previous Little Honeybee. After the confirmation, both Black Warrior Bunny and Sejun Park were astonished by the massive change. Queen Honeybee playfully posed. Her evolution was thanks to the fruits and vegetables Sejun Park had planted. Since eating the nectar in Sejun Park's cave, the scent on Little Honeybee had become stronger than before, and her body had grown fatter. Coupled with the original Queen Bee's wariness towards her, Little Honeybee understood the reasons for these changes. She too could have babies and become a Queen Bee. Therefore, Little Honeybee decided to set out on her own and built her beehive in the safest place she knew, Sejun Park's cave. Afterwards, she endured the pain alone in the beehive, and finally, after a few metamorphoses, Little Honeybee was reborn as a beautiful Queen Poisonous Honeybee. Sejun Park presented the freshest flowers to celebrate her evolution. Although the congratulations were a bit late, this was the first time the Queen Honeybee had received a gift. The happy Queen Honeybee flung herself into Sejun Park's arms, leaving him overwhelmed by her affection. Following this, the young honeybees mimicked the Queen Honeybee and cuddled Sejun Park. Queen Honeybee and the rabbit family also got along very well.